While many of us realize our high school education was a waste based on our own immature behaviors, there are thousands of other tryhards out there that slaved over every test and quiz, obsessed with their GPA and raising it by a few tenths of a point. If this was you, I'm about to reveal some scientifically backed evidence to suggest that most of that effort was an absolute waste of time. Okay, yes, that's a little bit clickbaity, but I want you to hear about this research. It's fascinating, and most people have no clue that what I'm about to share is what the actual research shows about the learning process. And as a professional educator, I want to educate you a little bit on what it's saying. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, as I'm about to show you how the brain actually learns and why your high school education was most likely a complete waste of your time. Let's go. Hey guys, my name is Nikki and welcome to my adventurous life. This is an eclectic channel that details my journey from being a frustrated public school teacher in America to living a life of adventure, pursuing meaningful work, and experiencing all that this world has to offer. In this video, you're going to learn about the brain and how real learning takes place. We're going to compare this science-backed approach to learning to the way you learned in school and show you how most of what you were exposed to by your high school teachers has probably slipped from your memory. Hopefully, by watching this video, you can utilize these techniques and reverse this trend in future learning efforts so that you can grow in your life and reach your fullest potential. As always, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and check out my website, nikkiforzane.com, to learn more about how you can transform your unfulfillment into a life of adventure as well. I read a book recently entitled Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning by Peter C. Brown, Mark A. McDaniel, and Henry L. Roedinger III. Though it was originally published in 2014, I had never been exposed to these ideas, even as someone who just completed a master's degree in education. I was never taught in that entire program the basic tenets of how the brain actually learns. I realized as a classroom educator and a lifelong learner myself that this information would have deep implications on my future career and my passions and hobbies. Now, you might be asking, come on, we pretty much know how learning works already, don't we? It isn't that complicated. And in one sense, you're right. Some of the techniques that many of our high school teachers and university professors used were perfectly in line with the research that Brown et al. Discovered in their writing. However, a large part of the findings in this book are extremely counterintuitive and lead us down avenues of learning that most of us have never even tried to explore before at all. If you want to make the most of your time and learn how to remember the things that you're studying, then you need to watch the rest of this video. I would also recommend purchasing a copy of Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning by Peter C. Brown et al., which you can find on Amazon, link in the description below. Okay, so how do you learn in a way that guarantees that you will not forget the information? Well, first of all, we need to define the term learn. According to the authors, learning has 3 essential characteristics. Number 1, for learning to be useful, it has to be remembered so that we can access it when we actually want to apply it to a real situation. Number 2, learning is a lifelong task, and it must be so for a life of fulfillment and success. And number 3, learning is actually a skill rather than a gene. That last point is extremely relevant for the rest of the book and what I try to do on this channel. I'm extremely opposed to the idea of a fixed mindset, and that the success that you have in life and the talents that you have are given mainly through your parental lineage and not through hard work, effort, and growth. Your ability is not defined by your genetics, circumstances, or any other elements that are outside of your control. Set your mind on doing something important, something valuable, something that you're passionate about and love. And if you put effort and work into that thing each and every day, even just a little bit of work, you will improve at it and find some meaning and fulfillment in your life. Ultimately, the only thing that can change your situation is your own conscious decision to better yourself. If you believe that your situation is already fixed, then it will be. Now for the learning strategies. There seem to be 11 points of emphasis that the authors really harp upon. I'm going to give you each of these 11 strategies and describe them a little bit in detail. Hopefully these 11 strategies will form sort of a learning playbook that you can utilize in your own private learning goals or in your classroom if you're an educator. Number 1, learning is more effective when it's effortful. This means that if you run into some sort of cognitive dissonance while completing the learning process, you'll probably remember it longer. If a topic is extremely easy for you, if you feel like you just get it right away, you're less likely to remember it longer. The authors of this book found that learning processes that felt difficult tended to stick with the subjects of the study much, much longer. Remember, point number 1, learning is more effective when it's effortful. Number 2 goes right along with that, and that is that we are poor judges of when we're learning effectively. You really can't trust your own judgment when it comes to learning. Typically, the times where you think you're just turning your wheels over and over again are the most impactful learning experiences you have. And the studies that these authors referenced showed that subjects who felt like they had a terrible learning experience tended to do much better at tests and quizzes over that material weeks later. This is something to remind your students if you're a classroom teacher, that when they feel frustrated, when they feel that cognitive dissonance, when they really don't want to continue learning, they're actually probably learning the most effectively. Number 3 is a bit of a surprising finding, and that is that rereading notes and massed practice are some of the least productive learning strategies, even though they make up a majority of our class time. Rote memorization, as you probably already guessed, is not a great way to learn, yet we continue to do it. We encourage students to take notes and then go home and study those notes. But we don't give them effective strategies for studying the notes. They end up rereading the notes time after time, and this massed repetitive practice is not effective as a learning strategy. Instead, number 4 of our 11 main points, we find that retrieval practice is one of the most effective learning strategies that there is. The most simple example that I can give you to illustrate what retrieval practice is making flashcards. When you see a term but are not given any hints to recall what is on the back of that card, you're forcing your brain to work backwards and retrieve the information that it's stored hours, days, weeks, or months ago. And when it retrieves that information, it solidifies the pathways in the brain to that information for future reference. Number 5 is another effective strategy that these authors discovered, and that is spaced practice. This is the act of returning to a subject after a brief interlude in time. They actually found that this is more effective than massed practice, as we covered in point number 3. When you go over one subject again and again and again and again, back to back to back to back to back, you're not actually going to improve your odds of memorizing that information. Instead, if you practice something, then put some space in between your practice sessions, whether that's doing something completely different like going for a run, or whether that's studying a different subject, you're actually going to be more effective at memorizing the information. Spaced repetition is point number 5. Number 6 is related to number 5, spaced repetition, that is interleaving. Interleaving 2 or more different subjects or types of activities is more effective for long-term memory than massing your practice and doing the same thing over and over. This is relevant for classroom teachers as well, because if you're going to be teaching a specific subject in the classroom that's extremely difficult, it can help actually to put a different non-related subject matter in the middle of that class block so that you use bookends of studying the difficult subject with something a little bit more enjoyable in the middle. Students will have much more effective memorization of terms, phrases, and strategies if you interleave 2 or more subjects. This goes the same for unit planning. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. Number 7, students actually learn more effectively when they attempt to solve a problem before being taught the solution, or even sometimes the entire process to discover the solution. This is what the authors call a blind attempt. And this is a very effective learning strategy because it forces students to utilize all their faculties to try to discover the answer on their own, rather than just being told the answer. We probably intuitively know that this is true, but sometimes it feels inefficient because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? But actually, reinventing the wheel helps someone learn much more effectively about wheels than if you just showed them the solution in the first place. Number 8, and this is a little bit of a controversial finding, but number 8 says that preferred learning styles, such as visual, audio, experiential learners, these types of preferred learning styles that we've heard about since we were in school, actually is not supported by the research. In fact, learning seems to happen the same way in every individual. Now, a preferred learning style might make an experience a little bit more enjoyable for someone, but it actually does not guarantee that they're going to learn that subject matter any more clearly. In fact, if number 1, the fact that effortful learning is more effective than non-effortful learning is true, then that means when we give a visual learner visuals, we might actually be hindering their learning process rather than spurring it forward. So number 8 is that preferred learning styles are not supported by the research. Number 9, people learn more effectively when they're taught the underlying principles of a subject matter rather than just given the branches. I think it's very important that we understand that knowledge really grows like a tree. You need a root system, you need a trunk to transport the water, and then you can have all of the different branches of knowledge. So people tend to learn more effectively when they're given context for a subject matter. Number 10, all of us are susceptible to illusions in our judgment of our own learning. This is very similar to a previous point which mentioned that people are not good judges of when they're learning and when they're not learning effectively. But all of us being susceptible to illusions is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a nuanced response in that it tells us that we might think we're learning really effectively when we're actually not. And this is something to keep in mind. Just because you feel like you're learning a concept does not mean that you're going to remember it. You need to follow the data and use strategies that have been proven to be effective, not just strategies that feel good. And finally, number 11, similar to the underlying principles idea, is that all knowledge is built on prior knowledge. Stephen Krashen is a famous linguist who publishes out of the University of Southern California, and he has this concept of I+1 learning, which is essentially that when people are learning a language, they will learn whatever their previous understanding of that language was, I, plus one additional concept that is one step above the knowledge that they already had in their repertoire. And this is true for all learning. You're going to build off of the prior knowledge you have. Nobody makes a leap and learns something that's not at all connected to things they haven't already learned. It's just not the way that semantic knowledge works. With that being said, you need to make sure that you build the foundations before you build the roof, or your house will collapse. That's whether you're a teacher or an independent learner. Now, compare these learning methods to the ones that we used in school and ask yourself, was high school a waste of my time? While overall the answer is probably no, you no doubt feel, as I do, that if I had been taught some of these strategies and principles and been drilled on them over and over and over throughout the years, I might have a little bit better base of knowledge to work with now than I actually do. So please, from now on, take the time to learn things the right way. And if you've forgotten some of these points, rewatch this video again and again, save it as a resource in a folder somewhere, and make sure that you understand that these 11 principles are going to help you remember things in the long run so that your learning will be effective.